Hello and welcome. Carsten Spencer here. Welcome to Flash Forum. I think I'm actually starting to get used to this whole Flash studio, which is exciting because I realize once I really get good at it, we're just going to be flying in here. But I want to thank everyone who's been hanging in there with me. I know we had quite a few tech issues last week, but ultimately I've gotten some really great feedback about the show. And I'm really excited because I just found out that a wonderful good friend of mine was back in New York City this past week, and she picked up 17 VHS tapes of a show that I used to do back in New York City. It was an entertainment show, skit comedy, and we were definitely ahead of our time. And she was sharing with me, she actually went out and picked up a VCR from a thrift store so she could watch the shows, and she went through all 15 of the show, or all 17 of the shows, and was sharing some of the stuff we did, and I'd forgotten some of these crazy shows we did. But anyway, you will in the coming weeks be seeing some of those because the people here at Bavac, how do you say it, Bavka, B-A-V-C, Bavka, are excited about being able to transfer these VHS tapes onto digital so we can share them with our audience. And so that's really exciting. And I'm also really excited to have TJ Woodward here in the studio with me. So I'm not by myself here today, and he's helping me push the right buttons. And probably part of what we're going to be talking about today is what to do when our buttons get pushed, because I'm still in the middle of my presence process, which I'll be sharing with you about. But what we're going to be talking about today with TJ is the kingdom of heaven within and what that means. And so I want to, as quickly as possible, introduce TJ, who is here with us in the studio, and say welcome. So glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Carsten. I'm so grateful to be here. I just, you and I have always amazing conversations, and it seems like when we're together, we could go on for hours, which I actually think is true. So here we are.
We could. So we have to make sure we're watching the time so we don't just run on.
Yes.
But thank you so much for being here. And I love the topic of the kingdom of heaven within. And so I guess I'm just going to turn it over to you and ask you, first of all, just share a little bit with my viewers who maybe this is the first time they have seen you. Just share a little bit about your journey. What's what brought you here today? Whatever's coming up for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carsten. Well, my name's TJ Woodward. People have recently asked me, what do you do? And it's not always necessarily a super easy question to answer. So I'm in private practice. I have a spiritual counseling practice, spiritual life coaching. And I'm the spiritual director of Awakened Living in San Francisco. Awakened Living is a spiritual community dedicated to personal and global transformation. And about a year ago, we started Awakened Living. A group of us came together, and how it ties into this topic is we came together to ask ourselves what is really wanted and needed in the 21st century in spiritual community. And all of us in the conversation, because it was really a brainstorming, it was us coming together and really asking that question. And a few key points came up. One, first and foremost, is people were saying, I don't want to be told what to believe anymore. I grew up in this religion that said X, Y, and Z because it's in this book or because this teacher said it. And so we really, at Awakened Living, wanted to provide a forum, and I believe we're doing that very successfully, provide a forum where we look for the answers within. And that can be called the kingdom of heaven, right? Because it's not a place or a destination, but it's all the answers are residing within me. So it's about accessing that.
I think that's so true. And I've been certainly involved with Awakened Living pretty much from the beginning because I've sort of been with you on your journey. And that's one of the powerful things about the work you do, whether it's your Saturday morning get-together, what do you call that group?
We call it the awakening process,
right.
And it's really about setting intention. We come together, and the room only holds 10, so it's anywhere between like 4 and 10 people, and we hold a space for each other, and we set an intention for our week, and it can be something as simple as I want a new job. I don't know if that's simple, but it seems pretty simple. Or it can be something that I really want to live more from my heart. And then together we have a process that we do about awakening to that as an intention, and how do we support each other in that.
I think that's a really powerful point when you said it can be about getting a job, and that's really simple. I think for me, this may be a key point about what the kingdom of heaven within and living from that place means, because I think from that inner place, and it's called many different things: the kingdom of heaven within, the divine spirit, the presence, the power of now, or being in the moment. But from that place, that kingdom of heaven within, there is no order of difficulty.
Oh, thank you. Yes, very good point.
So the ego mind, which in the head, is invested in having to figure things out. And so we'll come up with a divine idea. I want a new job. I want to do something where I'm reaching out and helping people. And just like you said, I'm create awakened living, a community of people who come together and support each other. And then the ego mind jumps in and figures out all the reasons why it can't happen, or all the possible problems that will come up. And then it starts projecting out all these problems. And I think the kingdom of heaven within is learning to live from that space where we trust and we put out the question, oh, this is what I want, and then we stay in the present instead of moving into why it can't happen or all the problems.
Well, that's interesting you say that about obstacles, because each week, and since we're talking about this group, each week on Saturday, there's a different process, and I trust my intuition around that. But this last week, I had people write down their intention and then share it with another person, and we wrote down 3 potential obstacles or perceived obstacles, because as you're saying, really obstacles really only exist in my mind, within reason, right? And I'll say that in my own journey, most of the time the obstacles have existed in my own mind, and they've come from an old story. So, and I love what you said, because for me, usually my intentions now are far less about an external thing, although sometimes it's usually more, I want to be able to live from my purpose. I want to be able to be more useful in the world. So for me, like, my intention was, some of the work that I do is I work with people in early recovery, coming out of an addiction of different sorts, and I'm a consultant for treatment centers, and I set the intention that I wanted to have more of that work because it's very, very powerful. For most people, when they're dealing with an addiction, the moment that addiction gets surrendered, there's something very powerful that happens because we've let go of one of the major blocks. And so when we're thinking about, or when we're being with this topic of the kingdom of heaven is within, what I have found in my own life, certainly, and in working with clients and working with people at Awakened Living, is the kingdom of heaven exists. That's the truth of who we are. But what covers that up are these old stories, these old false beliefs. And so when someone has a moment when they release an addiction, whether it's a drug addiction or whether it's a relationship addiction, it's that moment of surrender when I realize the truth of who I am. And my work is to be a presence for that. Not to diagnose someone as this or that or the other, but to see them as whole and perfect. And I know in my own life, there's something that comes up. In my own life, nothing's more painful than 99% surrender. And for a lot of people in an addiction, they live in that 99% surrender for maybe years. And then finally, when that moment happens and they walk into treatment or they walk into a counselor's office, there's something very powerful in that being willing to let go. And then suddenly, what's left? Heaven.
Yeah, I think that's so many things that you said are so powerful. And I think one of the clear points is that the kingdom of heaven within is right here and now.
Yeah.
And when we can tune into that present, which is basically what's happening with us right now, not an idea, because our ideas and our thoughts are the same thing, based in usually in an old story or an idea of what we want to happen in the future. What's happening right here and now is a feeling, and pretty much any goal or anything that we want to achieve or we want in life, we want it because of the feeling it's going to give us.
Yes, and that is so powerful. I love the work of Byron Katie. She has the 4 questions, and one of the questions is, who would I be without this thought? Right? And I really, really appreciate what you said, is it's not the thing that we want, it's the quality of what we believe it's going to bring us. And so quite often, like even in this last Saturday group, when we began to look at the obstacles and then share them with each other, And then the question I asked is, are they true? Are these obstacles true? Are they based on an old story? And I know I had some really early decisions. One of them was I'm not good enough. And that decision, really has influenced and informed absolutely everything in my life. So when I look at that, and I'm willing to dismantle that and realize that it's just a structure of knowing that isn't even true, then I can say, okay, what am I hoping this will bring me? I think so many of us spend our lives looking for a perfect relationship with a perfect job so that we can feel a particular way. And what I hear you saying, and what I appreciate too, Carsten, about your work, is that we already have we have everything we need. Like, what if we're the ones we've been waiting for, right?
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful, and that's so true. And what I'd love to do is do a process right here and now, because what I love to do is give people tools that they can really use to take with them. So with the idea of the kingdom of heaven is within, and what we're ultimately looking for is the feeling these things will give us. I think people can immediately go to, well, then I can just sit here and just have the feeling, and maybe that's true. And I think there were times when, the great masters, they sat up in a cave and that's what they did. They just were in that feeling and sending it out. But that may not be where the rest of us are here now. There's a joyful thing about connecting, being in the world, being in community. So there are still things that we want. But the question is, how do we get them based on the feeling within that we are the cause and the outside world is the effect, and not get up into the head? Because a lot of us, what we do is we would decide we want something, and then we go into the struggle. We get it, and it's not enough, or whatever. So let's do
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing
Yes.
really quickly about that. One of my first spiritual teachers would always ask me when I was wanting something, she would ask a very simple question: do you need this to happen? And if I could come to the place where I said, no, of course I don't need it to happen, she would say, okay, great. It's probably wonderful that you get it then, because it comes from that need, that thing that if I get this, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And what I hear you saying, and I'm looking forward to our process because I have no idea what it's going to be, is that knowing that the kingdom of heaven is already here. And from that place of knowing, I can create anything I want.
Yeah, beautiful. So what this technique is it's a manifesting technique, and it shows us that we don't create things by trying to figure out how to make it happen. We create things because usually the things that we want, we get an idea of something, that's divine spirit. We get an idea that gives us, I want this, and we get that feeling because it's going to make me feel this way. It's got that energy to it. So that feeling is the energy you need to create it. And what happens, I think one of the main addictions we have, and we learn this through the presence process and through so much other work, Byron Katie's work, certainly Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now and the New Earth, he talks about the power of being in the present moment. Most of us are addicted to living in time.
Absolutely.
Which means we're addicted to a story from the past, and we're projecting that story into the future, trying to figure out how to make things different, how to somehow undo this idea that something went wrong in the past, or something's not quite right here. There's something that we have to fix.
I love what Pema Chodron says. She says, and this one's a tough one for people, that hope and fear are really the same. And that people, I think, sometimes are challenged by that. I know the first time I read it, I was a little challenged, but then when I really understood, at least from my perspective, what she's saying is that hope and fear are both a desire to not be here in this present moment.
Beautiful.
And that hope is equally as limiting
Thank you.
or removing us from the present moment as fear. It's really one and the same.
It's a belief in being stuck and being not sure that everything is okay and that the kingdom of heaven is within. It's an idea of something out there.
Yes.
It's interesting because some of the work I've been doing lately, and I've been doing powerful work with clients over the phone. What I love about this work is it's recommended that you do it over the phone. It's called grief work, and it's based on Sue Frederick's work from her book that's about to come out, Bridges of Heaven. And it's about connecting with those who have passed on. It's really realizing how thin the veil is, and those people that have moved on are really present with us. And I tuned into my mom recently, and the great thing about this, since I've been doing this work, I feel my mother with me so powerfully, always giving me guidance. And I tuned into her about moving forward in my work and what I wanted. And she said, let go of hope. Hope is not necessary with faith. She said, tune into the faith. And the faith is the knowing when you get an idea, that feeling that you get from it enables you to get it. So let's move to the process, because the time just zips by here, especially when I've got someone like TJ here. So the process is, I want everyone either eyes open or eyes closed. I'm going to come into my camera. There we go. Oh, look, I'm getting good at this. I actually push the right buttons. So eyes open or closed, tune into something you want, something you've been wanting, you've been desiring. What is it in your life that you think is going to give you that feeling? And just imagine having the feeling. Just imagine having that thing and what it would feel like. And notice if there's a part of you that immediately wants to jump in and try to figure out how to do it, or what's your next step, or notice how quickly that, and it may not, but for many of us, that ego mind quickly comes up and comes in and wants to suddenly make it happen, because the ego mind starts to fear that feeling is going to go away if you can't have that thing. And it can be triggered by that old story, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve. So if you stay with the feeling and trust that feeling is the substance, the energy, the faith that you need to create that thing. And then you can ask the question, how is this going to manifest, or how can this happen? From that kingdom of heaven within, not from that reasoning mind up in your head. And trust that the answer will come when the time is right. And then be willing to let it go. It's a simple technique, but I think it's powerful, and I think it incorporates all the stuff we've learned about affirmations and everything. But for me, it helps me to understand that the substance of what moves us forward, the energy that actually creates, is the solar plexus. This willpower, where our willpower lives and our feelings live. Our feelings are always in the present moment. So that feeling of, oh good, I want that to happen.
Yeah, and a couple of things came up for me when I was with that process. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but ask yourself the question. And for me, I've noticed that in this conversation about affirmations, for me, I'm going to talk about my own journey with that rather than making anything right or wrong. So my own journey with that is when I came into kind of spiritual teaching or new thought, you might call it, I quickly grabbed onto this affirmation thing because I believed that I had the power to create my life however I wanted it to look. And I know that that's true. But what happened for me is I did that for many years, but there was something subtly happening, and that was, when I get this, I'm going to be okay, right? Because I wanted a certain amount of prosperity, I wanted a certain relationship, I wanted the house, I wanted the car. And for me, what happened is I got all of that. And then what happened is I began to look at, now what? What does this mean? So what I think you're saying is really a lot about being in the feeling of that right now. And for me, once I'm really in that feeling and I honor that it is truly heaven to be in this present moment, usually the wanting goes away, right? So it becomes much less about what happens on the external world and much more about what's happening in my own relationship with myself. And here's the paradox. In my own journey, when I get to that place, and when I really, really do live from that kingdom of heaven, all of a sudden the outer world matches it. And in my own journey, like I've shared with you, I've been wanting to get more work, working with people in early recovery. And there was a lot of once I get this, once I get that, I'm going to make this happen. And when I kind of surrendered to it and thought, oh, wait a minute, I know what my purpose is. And when I really got clear with knowing my purpose, all of a sudden the phone started ringing. All of a sudden there were offers. And I can't fool the universe in that way. So that's something that I know that you and I have had a great conversation about. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and it brings me back to what we're really practicing in the presence process, which is what I'm working through with a group of clients right now, and we're going to be starting another process in the middle of May. It's a 10-week process, but it really is about owning the fact that we are the cause, and whatever is happening on the outside is the effect. And I think that is such a... it flies in the face of so much of what we're taught. We're taught to try to fix the outside world, and partly what you also talked about was the questions. And I know you're a lot of... when I first heard you speak at Unity, what you talked about is asking the right questions.
Yes.
And so we've got a few minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about how we can use questions from that kingdom of heaven within to help us call in that creative energy to continue to create or mirror this kingdom of heaven within, so it shows up more and more in the outside
thank you.
world.
And of course, this is one of my favorite topics, because I find that for myself in my own journey, my mind, the role of my mind, and when I say mind, I mean the brain, really, which is an organ. Yeah. Someone,
it's
recently
a computer,
shared
it's a processor.
It's like the heart beats, the mind thinks, but my mind is always looking for answers. And then when the questions came up, my question is usually, why do I feel this way? Why is this happening again? And at some point, I know we've probably all heard this, that why is not a spiritual question. And I had someone gently invite me to, when I find
I just want to stop for a minute and breathe into that, because
Okay.
I've heard that a lot of times, and I'm not quite sure I get it in my mind, and I don't have to get it right now. But let's just breathe it. Why is not a spiritual question?
And I can share with you what my own journey around why not being a spiritual question is that the why is the mind trying to figure it out. And this is not ultimately a mental process, because for most of us, we believe that if we figure it out or if we find the answer, we'll be okay. And so living in the question, I was gently persuaded or offered an invitation to change that to what or how.
Yeah.
So when my mind is like, why am I in this experience again? Why am I still attracted to unavailable people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? When I change that to how am I willing to work with this? What else is possible? What am I really wanting here? So to shift from a question of why, which is really a mind trying to figure it out, because what I really believe strongly is, can I live in the question? That's a valuable question right there. Yeah. In what way can I live in this question? Yeah. So what else is possible? Yeah. What does my soul really want here? What is asking for attention? Because I know in the presence process, although I haven't done it, I'm guessing that one part of being present is to ask, what is it that my soul is asking right now? Or what is it that I'm longing for?
Yeah, and the answer is that presence always knows, and bringing us back to the kingdom of heaven within. That is that place. What is heaven? That place where all our needs are met before we even ask, which is what Christ says, that the Spirit knows. So I think we're moving to the end, so I really kind of want to sum up what we've talked about here, and I want to sum it up with the question, since we're talking about questions. How can it get any better than this?
Yes.
I love that question, because inherent within it is a sense of gratitude, is a sense that good things are already happening. And it also brings us back to our unity principle, which I love. There is only one power, one presence active in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent.
Yeah, and the illusion of something other than that comes in our thinking, our story.
Right, exactly. And if that is true, then there is no why. There's no reason to figure it out. It's all good. And there's just that, how can it get any better? What's the next step? And since we are made in the image of God the Creator, we are creative beings. So why does it matter?
Right.
It's how. How do we create more? How do we move into more life? So that idea of focusing on the kingdom of heaven within, trusting that it's coming from you, and being willing to live in the question. Ask, and ye shall receive. Wait for the answer, and as much as you can, be willing to be in that place of love and light. And if you're not, and other feelings are coming up, instead of trying to judge them and push them away, just be with the feeling without the story. Allow yourself to feel it. And I'm going to share more about that in the presence process in a future show. Thank you so much for watching. TJ, thank you so much for being
Thank
you.
you.
Bless you, and
Thank
I want to
you,
give us
Carsten.
enough time to show our final rollout. Bless you. See you soon. And I think I go here and take Did that stop it?
I think so. You're supposed to push one of these two, but I think it's fine.
Okay.